and dreamt of owning one. At 23, after years of saving, he finally bought a sleek, black sports car. The moment he got behind the wheel, he felt invincible. Speeding through highways and racing with friends became his weekend routine, ignoring every warning from his family about the dangers of reckless driving. One Friday night, Jake attended a party with his friends. The atmosphere was lively, and he had a few drinks, but he felt fine to drive. As he left the party around midnight, the streets were empty, and temptation got the best of him. He revved his engine and sped through the city, ignoring traffic signals and speed limits. The rush of adrenaline made him feel alive until he saw the flashing red lights in his rearview mirror. A police officer signaled him to pull over, but instead of stopping, Jake panicked and pressed the accelerator harder. His heart pounded as he weaved through the streets, trying to escape. Then, in a split second, everything changed. A truck appeared from a side road, and before Jake could react, his car collided with it at full speed. The next thing he remembered was waking up in a hospital bed, his body aching. His mother sat beside him, eyes red from crying. "You almost died, Jake," she whispered, holding his hand. He soon learned that the truck driver had suffered a broken arm, but thankfully, no one had died. Still, Jake faced severe consequences. His license was suspended, he was charged with reckless driving, and he was sentenced to 6 months of community service. His punishment included working at a rehabilitation center for accident survivors. On his first day, he met Eric, a young man in a wheelchair who had lost both legs in a car accident caused by a drunk driver. Listening to Eric's story shook Jake to his core. "I used to love driving too," Eric said. "But one mistake took everything away from me." For the first time, Jake realized the true impact of reckless driving. He had always thought of it as a game, but now he saw the lives that were shattered because of it. Determined to change, he dedicated himself to his community service. He helped victims with their daily needs, listened to their struggles, and spoke at road safety awareness events. Months passed, and Jake completed his sentence, but he didn't stop there. He enrolled in a defensive driving course and started volunteering at schools to educate young drivers about the dangers of speeding and driving under the influence. His story became a lesson for many, preventing others from making the same mistakes he had. Years later, Jake became a licensed driving instructor, focusing on safe and responsible driving. Every time he taught a new student, he remembered his own reckless past and vowed to make a difference. He knew he couldn't erase his mistakes, but he could use them to save lives. Driving isn't just about getting from one place to another, it's about ensuring everyone on the road gets home safely. Jake had learned that lesson the hard way, but he was determined to make sure others learned it before it was too late. Title: The Road to Chaos. Mark had always been a careful planner. His mornings were a precise routine: wake up at 6 a.m., grab a quick shower, eat breakfast, and leave home by 7 o'clock sharp. He worked as a financial analyst in downtown Chicago, and though traffic was usually bad, he had mastered the art of weaving through shortcuts and alternative routes. But on this particular morning, nothing went according to plan. As he pulled out of his driveway, he glanced at his GPS. Estimated arrival, 7:45 a.m. Perfect. He turned on his favorite news podcast and sipped his coffee, confident that today would be just another smooth commute. That confidence shattered the moment he reached the first intersection. Traffic was backed up for miles. Cars inched forward at a painful pace, brake lights blinking like angry fireflies. Mark sighed and turned on the local traffic report. A major accident on the expressway has led to complete gridlock in the downtown area. Drivers are advised to find alternative routes. Great. He had already planned for a few delays, but this was on a whole different level. Mark took a deep breath, pulled up the GPS, and searched for a detour. A side street near the industrial district looked promising. He took a right turn, relieved to be free of the jam. For a few minutes, things went smoothly. The road was nearly empty, and he picked up speed. But just as he was starting to feel victorious, a flashing sign loomed ahead, "Road closed for construction." "You've got to be kidding me." Mark groaned, slamming the steering wheel. With no choice but to turn back, he found himself back in the traffic jam he had tried so hard to avoid. He gritted his teeth and resigned himself to the crawl, checking his watch every few minutes. As the minutes ticked by, he noticed the people around him. A mother in the next car was trying to calm a crying baby. A man in a business suit furiously typed away on his laptop in the passenger seat. A teenager in another car drummed on his dashboard, singing along to a song only he could hear. Mark sighed. Everyone was in the same situation, yet some seemed to take it better than others. He tried to relax, but the mounting frustration made it impossible. When the cars finally started moving, he floored the gas pedal, eager to make up lost time. Then, the worst happened. Just as he was about to merge onto the highway, a police officer signaled him to pull over. "Sir, you were speeding in a slow-moving traffic zone," the officer said sternly. Mark stared in disbelief. "But I was barely going over the limit." "License and registration, please." He had no choice but to comply. As the officer wrote out the ticket, Mark clenched his jaw. This morning was officially a disaster. By the time he got back on the road, it was already 8:30 a.m. He was beyond late. When he finally arrived at his office, he was ready for his boss to chew him out. Instead, he was met with laughter. "Don't worry, Mark. The meeting was postponed." "Half the office got stuck in that same traffic jam," his co-worker chuckled. Mark let out a breath he didn't realize he was holding. Maybe this day hadn't been a total failure after all. Maybe, just maybe, he needed to learn that some things were simply out of his control. And in a city like Chicago, traffic was definitely one of them. A new beginning on the road. Mark had always been fascinated by cars. Ever since he was a child, he would spend hours watching car races and dreaming about the day he would own a powerful vehicle. By the time he turned 24, that dream had become a reality. Mark had just purchased his first car, a red sports coupe with a roaring engine that made him feel unstoppable. Speed was his addiction. Every evening, after work, he would drive through the city streets, enjoying the thrill of high speeds. His friends often warned him about the dangers of reckless driving, but he always laughed it off. "I'm a great driver. Nothing will happen to me," he would say confidently. However, fate had a lesson waiting for him. One Saturday night, Mark and his best friend, Ryan, attended a music festival outside the city. The event was filled with energy, and they had a fantastic time. As the night ended, Mark, feeling a mix of exhaustion and excitement, decided to drive back home despite Ryan's suggestion to stay the night. "I can handle it," he insisted. The highway was nearly empty, and Mark saw it as the perfect opportunity to test his car's speed limit. The speedometer climbed higher and higher as he raced down the road, the wind rushing past. However, as he approached a sharp turn, he miscalculated. The car skidded off the road, flipping multiple times before coming to a halt in a ditch. The world around him was spinning. Pain shot through his body, and he could hear Ryan groaning beside him. Fear gripped his heart as he realized the severity of the crash. Soon, flashing red and blue lights filled the night, and paramedics rushed to the scene. At the hospital, Mark learned that Ryan had suffered a broken leg and a concussion. The guilt weighed heavily on his chest. His reckless decision had not only endangered his life but had also caused pain to his best friend. When the police arrived to question him, reality finally hit. He was charged with reckless driving and endangering another person's life. His license was suspended, and he was sentenced to community service. For the next 6 months, Mark was assigned to a rehabilitation center, where he assisted accident survivors. He met people who had lost limbs, people who would never walk again, and families whose loved ones had died due to reckless driving. One particular patient, an elderly man named Mr. Thompson, left a deep impact on him. Mr. Thompson had been a victim of a hit-and-run accident. He had once been an active grandfather who played soccer with his grandchildren, but now he was confined to a wheelchair. "I used to take walks every evening," he told Mark. "One careless driver took that away from me. Now, I can only watch my grandkids play from a distance." Hearing these stories opened Mark's eyes. He had always thought of driving as a game, something thrilling and exciting. But in reality, every reckless decision had consequences not just for the driver, but for others on the road. After completing his sentence, Mark decided to make a change. He enrolled in a defensive driving course, determined to become a more responsible driver. He also started volunteering at schools, sharing his story with young drivers. "I used to think accidents only happened to other people," he would tell them. "But in a single moment, everything can change." As years passed, Mark transformed his passion for cars into something meaningful. He became a road safety advocate, working with organizations to promote responsible driving. He even trained to become a certified driving instructor, helping young drivers understand the importance of road awareness and caution. One day, he received a message from Ryan. "Proud of you, man. You turned things around," it read. Mark smiled. He had once been reckless, but now he had a purpose to ensure that no one else made the same mistakes he had. Driving was no longer just about speed for him. It was about responsibility, about ensuring that every person on the road reached their destination safely. And with every student he trained, every seminar he attended, and every young driver he advised, he knew he was making a difference. Mark's journey had come full circle. What had once been his greatest mistake had turned into his greatest lesson. He had found a new beginning on the road, one built on safety, awareness, and the drive to protect lives. Title: Stuck in the City Maze. Daniel had always prided himself on his ability to beat the morning rush. He had his route mapped out, knew exactly when to leave, and even had a backup plan in case of minor delays. But today, all his careful planning was about to be tested. He left his apartment at precisely 7 a.m., as usual. The GPS predicted a smooth commute, estimating his arrival at the office by 7:45. Confident, he sipped his coffee and turned on his favorite music playlist. As soon as he reached the main road, his heart sank. A long line of cars stretched ahead, barely moving. He groaned and turned on the radio. "Traffic alert, a major accident on the freeway has caused severe delays. Avoid the downtown area if possible." Daniel cursed under his breath. He knew that his usual route was no longer an option. Quickly, he pulled up an alternative route on his phone. There was a side road through a residential area that seemed to bypass most of the congestion. Without hesitation, he took a sharp right. At first, it seemed like a genius move. The streets were clear, and he picked up speed. But just as he was beginning to feel relieved, he saw a flashing sign: "Road closed for repairs." "Unbelievable," Daniel muttered, gripping the steering wheel in frustration. With no choice but to backtrack, he found himself trapped in an even worse jam than before. As the minutes dragged on, he glanced at the other drivers around him. A man in a business suit was frantically typing on his laptop. A mother in the next car tried to calm her crying toddler. A delivery driver honked impatiently, though there was nowhere to go. Daniel exhaled and drummed his fingers on the dashboard. There was nothing to do but wait. Then, an idea struck him. What if he abandoned his car? A subway station was just a few blocks away. It was risky, but at this rate, he wouldn't reach his office in time anyway. Making up his mind, he pulled into a parking lot, grabbed his bag, and jogged towards the station. The subway was crowded, but at least it was moving. 20 minutes later, he emerged downtown, just a few blocks from his office. Checking his watch, he realized that he might actually make it in time for his meeting. Breathless, he sprinted the last stretch and burst through the office doors at exactly 8:58 a.m. His boss raised an eyebrow but said nothing. As Daniel sank into his chair, catching his breath, he realized something. No matter how much he planned, the city would always be unpredictable. But adaptability, now that was the true key to surviving the morning commute.